why do they need the Great War? It is only when I studied eschatology, Dr. Byron, that I realized the genesis of Pax Britannica. I never understood Pax Britannica in the classroom while Leslie Manigat was teaching us. I never understood the movement or the transition from Pax Britannica to Pax Americana and the obsession of both of them with Israel. Obsession. And only when I went to eschatology did I realize that there's a third part of the equation. That Pax Britannica and Pax Americana were meant to prepare the way for Pax Judaica, so that the state of Israel might rule the world. Israel is small. The world is big. The United States is big. How can the small Israel rule a big world? Either that Israel has to become big or the world has to become small. Which one will it be? Which one will it be? Either that Israel has to become big or the world has to become small. Which one will it be? Now you can understand why they need the Great War. It can start with an attack in Venezuela, because Russia now has troops in Venezuela, taking the Monroe Doctrine and slapping it on his face for the first time in history. Huh? You'll be familiar with the Monroe Doctrine as students of international relations. Or it could start in Korea. I don't know where it'll start, but I do know that the big war is going to be concentrated in the Middle East. Pakistan is part of this equation, because while Russia is a nuclear power and there's nothing they can do about that, and China is a nuclear power and there's nothing they can do about that, but there's no part of the Muslim world which has that military power, certainly not the Arab world. And Pakistan's possession of a nuclear deterrence is a threat to them. And so, while I have great respect for the Hindu religion, and I have great admiration, I enjoyed traveling in India, my roots are from India, I have to recognize that the present Indian government is in league, yes, with the oppressors of the world. And that immediately the Great War commences, one can close your eyes and anticipate that India, in collaboration with Israel, is going to launch an attack on Pakistan in order to seek to denuclearize Pakistan. These are the gist of what I wanted to convey to you today. The subject is much bigger than this, but I do believe that I presented to you an Islamic eschatological explanation of the Great War and of events which will follow the war in the question and answer session which now follows. I may get a chance to expand. Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Thank you very much. As Imran Hosein, you've certainly laid the basis for a lot of questions. So the floor is now open. What I would ask is, when you make a comment or ask a question, just say who you are and then ask the question or make a comment. Try not to make it too long so that we can get quite a lot in. We'll try to have about, at least 2 rounds of questions. So let's say we have 4 or 5 questions, and then I'd allow the scholar to answer, and then we have a second round. So who would like to get the ball rolling? Yeah, I see. Was your hand up, Alicia? Okay, I think first, and then over to you, sir.
So, good afternoon, Master Hussein. Yes, I want to, first of all, I'm Alicia Shepherd. I am a past student of the Institute. I'm now studying developmental statistics in Felices. I want to first thank you for your presentation. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Yes, I would like to first of all thank you for your presentation. I've learned quite a lot. I have a question, though it might not be of much significance, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless. I read, just before I came to the presentation, of, I think it's an article in the Davos platform, that at present in China there is a movement towards the more or less the eradication of Islamic groups that have been strongholds. So it comes to me as quite a surprise when you said that the connection between Russia and China is one of great significance, especially in relation to Islam. So how would you merge what is happening in China and its relations with the Islamic communities and what you had said earlier?
Yeah, one by one, yes, better. The most important Muslim country close to that geographical region where we are told that these things are occurring is Pakistan. But Pakistan has had a very, very long and very strong and intimate alliance, I think you have to call it an alliance, with China. And nothing has happened which has disturbed that relationship between Pakistan and China. There is absolutely no protest in Pakistan, no people seeking to get the Pakistani government to take up any issue with China, and so on. And so it appears to be something of less than peripheral importance to our subject.
My name is Imtiaz Ali. I am a retired person. I am now the Imam of a small masjid in San Juan. Maulana Sahib, you mentioned that the Holy Quran talks about the Great War will witness the end of the West, and you quoted, and you did not quote the verse or the chapter of the Quran.
I told you that I am interpreting the Quran. Now that you have put me on the spot, well, then I have to share with you. So you'll explain, you'll now forgive me. In Surah Al-Isra, the Quran, which is number 17, at the end of the surah, the Quran informs us. We have an eminent Islamic scholar with us, but I prefer not to quote the Arabic, that that there is going to be punishment from the Lord God, and every town and every city will be destroyed, and this will happen before the end of the world, and those which escape destruction will be punished with great punishment. The Lord God governs with justice and would not destroy a people unjustly. Who are those then who deserve to be destroyed? And in Surah Ar-Rahman, which is Surah number 55, he comes back to the subject of that destruction. And he says, I'm going to deal with both of you who are laden with sin. laden with sin. When we look at religious history, we see that there was divine destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Which part of the world today is leading the vanguard, the caravan, for a man to marry another man and get a marriage certificate? It is the modern West. Secondly, he has declared war on the moneylender in the very last revelation of the Quran. And I was explaining to Dr. Byron, I was arguing with Patricia Robinson in the classroom. Of course, it was a friendly give and take between. She was a dear teacher of mine. I loved her so much. Patricia Robinson, the wife of A&R Robinson. And I was trying to explain to her that no, Shylock is a bad man. Yes, and lending and borrowing money and interest is destructive of the free and fair market. And she was arguing, but I can't give you my money free of charge. You got to pay for it. What I did not understand at that time, to explain to her, is that when money is lent on interest and borrowed on interest, when the economy is based on usury, that money will no longer circulate through the economy. No. Money should not circulate only amongst the wealthy. No, that's condemned in the Quran. But when the economy is based on usury, money will circulate only amongst the wealthy. And when the poor are relegated to permanent poverty, as they were in Venezuela before Chavez, as they were in Venezuela before Chavez, let's not forget that, then that's oppression. That's oppression. And the Lord God has declared in the Quran that He's going to wage war. Who is the money lender of the world today? When Pax Britannica came on the stage of the world, the Bank of England was established. Was it 1697? And the Bank of England and London became the money lending capital of the world. And when Pax Americana replaced Pax Britannica, the sterling pound gave way to the US dollar at Bretton Woods. That's the most important thing about Bretton Woods. And Washington and the American banking system became the moneylenders par excellence of the world. So who are those who deserve to be destroyed? Not those who are borrowing the money and remaining in permanent poverty like Pakistan, but those who are lending the money. So the Western world deserves, they qualify eminently so to be destroyed.
Next question. While you're formulating your questions, there's one that I wanted to ask, although it is not directly related to some of what you have said. There has been, you mentioned, at some point you mentioned the fall of the caliphate in the Turkish Caliphate and the Ottoman Empire. Now, recently we have witnessed an attempt in the case of ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, to try to re-establish a caliphate as the most desirable form of state. And I just wondered what is your view on that? I'd love to hear that.
Well, I looked around and I saw that it was Santa Claus who was delivering all the weapons to them. Yes. Santa Claus was delivering all the weapons, state-of-the-art weapons to them. And Santa Claus was doing all the financing, of course, US dollars. One of them came here to Trinidad, went to Rio Claro with a briefcase filled with US dollars, which explains why so many of them left Trinidad. You don't need a PhD to understand that. Okay. I recognize it to be a bogus jihad, religious war. And I said many moons ago, I said, if you go out there to fight in that so-called jihad and you're killed, I will not pray over your body. And I'll never stand at your grave. That's right. So I don't recognize that as a valid, bona fide effort to restore the caliphate. You cannot restore the caliphate. When you study eschatology, and I have not taken you in this lecture, I have not treated the subject of the Antichrist adequately, and I have not even touched on Gog and Magog. It will be too much for you. But these are very, very important actors in the historical process, but particularly at the end of history, who occupy a very, very important place in religious eschatology, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. So the caliphate cannot be restored. No. The caliphate is not a unique institution in history. What the Prophet David, Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, what David established in Jerusalem is what we call a Khilafah state, and they call it Holy Israel. It's the same thing. And the Quran says the definition of a caliphate or a Khilafah state, the definition is that rule is established, governance is established, the state of law, the state of the statecraft on the basis of truth. So if you're a politician and you don't have truth as your foundations, you're in trouble. Because the Quran goes on to say, particularly to the politician, that if you turn away from truth to follow any other agenda, then there is terrible punishment waiting for you because you forgot the day of accounts. I just want to take the subject of caliphate and put it in context. It's nothing new. It is the same system of state and government which came to the world with David and with Solomon. Allah's blessings be upon them.
I think we have another question.
My name is Ishan Ali, most learned scholar. Assalamu alaikum. You had spoke about the Orthodox, where the origin of Christians will go back to the Orthodox and merge as to be those supporting Muslims and uniting with them. Now we know in every great war, we will have a leader to fight that war. The clarity of Imam Mahdi and the coming, as I say, who will be that leader to fight that war. Exactly, what will be his position, what will be his authority into leading that war, as we would hear about.
Not introduce Imam al-Mahdi into this discussion. What the Prophet said, Allah's blessings be upon him, you will conquer Constantinople. And he went on to praise the commander of that army. He did not identify him. And he went on to praise the army, which will be a Muslim army. So I had to tell them that in Moscow. You don't have to conquer Constantinople, we have to do it. If you attempt to conquer Constantinople, it's going to trigger off Muslim-Christian warfare. It's like Iran trying to conquer Mecca. If Iran, the Shia, ever enter into the Arabian Peninsula with an armed force, it's going to trigger off Sunni Shia civil war in the world of Islam. So it is not a Christian Russian army which will conquer Constantinople. No. I had to tell him that in Moscow. It is a Muslim army which will do it. So I asked the question, why is he praising the commander? And why is he praising the army? It took a long time for me to recognize. Knowledge comes in bits and pieces. But I realized finally it is because they, up to now, they're beating the drums in Turkey and in the Balkans. You know the word Balkan? Balkan? The Balkan would be Bosnia and Serbia and Montenegro and Albania and so on. These are called the Balkan countries. They are beating the drums up to this day, celebrating. What a wonderful army that was in 1452, which conquered Constantinople. And what a great, great, great commander that was, Sultan Muhammad Fatih. They have movies about Sultan Muhammad Fatih, that this is the man identified by the Prophet. Allah's blessing be upon him. So because you are praising that army, and you are praising that commander, he has praised this army, and he has praised this commander.
Well, Winston Dukran, and I recollect you said, Maulana, that the global liberal order may be under some kind of, I won't say review, but some kind of undermining. And there is a current debate that is taking place in Western literature as to what will be the shape of this global liberal order in global politics in the future, and whether the era of the hegemony is now gone for good, and what would in fact replace this, if anything at all. And there are many thinkers who are suggesting different formulations. I was wondering, given your vast experience in understanding the forces of political order which you have expressed here today, from a historical and religious perspective, what are your thoughts on the emergence of a new global order that will emerge in beyond?
The appearance of the world today is that we have moved away from slavery. And we're moving towards more and more freedom. We were a British colony, a crown colony. Then we got self-rule in 1956, and then we became independent in 62 and so on, then became a republic in 67. And we're moving in the direction of greater freedom. The reality is the opposite. That we are on a path which is going to culminate with the greatest slavery of all. Israel and Pax Judaica cannot achieve the objective without enslavement of mankind. And the most dreadful form of slavery is intellectual slavery. It is when a people lose the capacity to think. And before our very eyes now we're seeing it, that mankind is being sucked, trapped in what may be described as the fast lane. You know, the highway has a slow lane and a fast lane and so on in the middle lane. Sucked into the fast lane of life. And as you are sucked into the fast lane of life, times move faster. The Prophet said a whole year will pass like a month, and a whole month like a week, and a whole week like a day, etc. Unless you are sucked into the fast lane of life, which is why the television screen, the images are changing so rapidly, so that you do not have a chance to think. As you are trapped into the fast lane of life, you see the quality of your students in your school declining. Look at the kind of students we used to have yesterday, and look at the rubbish we now have today. As you are trapped into the fast lane of life, something else happens. And that is that the electromagnetic waves with which we are now being inundated, for me, this is the beast of the earth, which is there in eschatology. It is going to damage memory. Check it out. Check it out with your children. If you are 8 and 9 years of age, we are accustomed to an 8 and 9 and 10-year-old child memorizing the whole Quran. We are accustomed to that. The whole Quran is memorized by a child 8, 9, 10 years of age. Don't try it when you're 40 or 50. You're not going to succeed. Tomorrow, no child who grows up in the city, I anticipate, will be able to memorize the Quran. No. Your memory is declining. And if you do not have a strong memory, you cannot become a thinker. If you do not have a strong memory, you cannot become a thinker. Memory and thinking are intimately linked with each other. And so the world is moving in a direction of intellectual slavery, when people lose the capacity to think and they become brainwashed and they'll beat the drums. Anything the slave master plays, they will dance to that tune. This is needed, because tomorrow is not democracy. Tomorrow is monarchy. Israel has to restore the model of a state that existed in Jerusalem, and that was a monarchy. And so there won't be a president in Israel and a prime minister. There'll be a king in Israel. And so the world has to be taken by the neck. Western civilization has to be thrown away. And mankind has to be taken back to that model which was in Jerusalem. It is not that liberal thinking will disappear. It is that mankind's freedom to think and to express itself will be circumscribed by the truth which is coming from the Lord God. Within that framework, you do have the freedom to think, but you cannot challenge the truth which has come from the Lord God.
Maulana, very interesting lecture. My name is Dr. Umar Ali. I always wondered why the Western world fights against Russia when in the last World War, Russia was their ally. And specifically in contemporary times, we say Russia is coming to the aid of Syria as opposed to the Western world. And I'm seeing a similar type of people, similar religious type of people, same color, and why it is that there seems to be this war between the Western world and Russia.
The first great war of the age of modern military technology the scientific and technological revolution applied to military technology. The first Great War was which one? Anybody? The Civil War in the United States. Anybody else? World War I. Anybody else? My view is the Crimean War. 1852 to 1855. The first major war of the modern age of military technology. And the Western world combined to fight Russia. So the animosity for Russia goes back a long time. But before that, you have to do a little bit of homework in international relations if you want to understand the genesis of modern Western civilization. That Constantinople was a Christian city, and it became a Christian city without any fighting. No. That part of the Israelite world which rejected the Messiah remained in exile, scattered all over the world. But that part of the Israelite world who accepted the Messiah found a home in Constantinople and attempted in Constantinople to restore a holy state. That's why it was known as the Holy Byzantine Empire. But then we have a nice term here in Trinidad, they call it couture. Commerce, bickering, fighting, and they broke apart. One part of the Christian world broke away from Constantinople and came to Rome. And I wish I had the time to share with you the causes for that breakup. But this part which broke away from the Orthodox Christian world, from that day to this day, has had two enemies. It has become an enemy of Islam because they broke away in 1052, and within the next 50 years they launched the Crusades. The first major event after the breakup of the Christian world and the emergence of Western Christianity was a Pope in Rome gathering his troops for the Crusades. And so Islam became their nemesis. But on the way to Jerusalem, they conquered Constantinople. And so the Orthodox Christian world was also their nemesis. They had two up to that time. From that time, Russia replaced Constantinople. And so the hatred and animosity and rivalry existed from that day to this day. It culminated with the Crimean War. Okay? In the First World War, I'm sorry I have to take a little bit of your time now. They set a trap for Russia. It was still Tsarist Russia. And they had fought Russia in the Crimean War. They knew that the Orthodox Christian world wanted Constantinople. So they entered into secret negotiations, Britain and France, with Russia. That if you join with us in a tripartite alliance, the Ottoman Empire is the sick man of Europe. They're going to collapse. You just help us to get rid of it. You be the guinea pig and you do the fighting and we stop and watch you. And when Constantinople collapses and the Ottoman Empire collapses, we'll give Constantinople to you. And the Russians were just like King Faisal, only peanuts in their head. So they accepted the deal. That's why Russia became the ally in the First World War. And when the Russian army was an arm's length away from Constantinople, that was when they struck, because they didn't want Russia to get Constantinople. So that's when the Bolshevik Revolution took place. and the new government took over in Russia. Do you know who was sitting in a restaurant across the road when Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo in the summer of 1914? Sitting in a restaurant across the road was Leon Trotsky. Yes. So the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which triggered off the First World War, was not something by accident. Now, they wanted Russia in on their side, and they gave this alliance. As soon as the Bolsheviks murdered the family of the Tsar and took over Russia, they then published the secret alliance, secret clauses of the alliance. So it became public knowledge that if you join with us, we'll give you Constantinople. It's now public knowledge. And the Russians fell for the trap because Russia, under the Bolsheviks, withdrew from the war. So the Russian army could not go to Constantinople. In the Second World War, it was not Russia anymore. The Bolsheviks, this is history, you can just check it out. The Bolsheviks were led by Jews. This is history, it's not secret. Preponderantly Jewish leadership over the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin's trip from Washington was paid by Wall Street. And then came a Soviet Union, which was a avowedly Marxist and atheist state. Atheist state. And they then unleashed a persecution of the Orthodox Christian Church and of the priests, with thousands of them being murdered. That Christianity survived in Russia is a miracle. And so the Soviet Union, while it did do certain good things, and I had to concede, eventually I had to accept it, the Russians argued with me, that the Soviet Union did many good things, but the Soviet Union had a side of its face which was turned towards Washington. And so the Second World War did not end when it was supposed to end. The Second World War continued after it ended, after Hitler had been killed and Germany had surrendered. Why is the Second World War still continuing? Because the Western world still have an agenda to fulfill, and they needed the Soviet Union to do it. But now that's history, because Russia has returned to her Orthodox Christian.
I think we'll have the last question now, which is the young lady.
Hello. Hi, good day. My name is Dr. Daniel Giroux. It's not so much, I don't know, it might end up being a question, but it's just me trying to understand some statements that you made about the Western world being ones that deserve to die due to homosexuality and lending money for interest. The world is such that it's so easy to travel from one place to another or to communicate through the internet. So everywhere in the world we have friends and family. Every terrorist attack we always see afterwards a list of persons that died from different countries from around the world because they were just visiting or living there. I'm sure everyone in this room have ancestors from different parts of the world beyond just Trinidad. And with that in mind, I think if a small group of persons want to attack the Western world, then the eyes wouldn't only open up for the Western world, but everyone around the world, because that will be family and friends of everyone around the world that being attacked. So I think that it would never result in peace. It could never be peaceful. Do you agree?
We all wish to have a peaceful world. But there can be no peace without justice. And oppression is injustice. And those who follow the religious way of life and who long for peace are people who are prepared to make whatever sacrifice they have to make if true peace is to ever come. History began with truth and therefore began with peace. And we are a people with a conviction that history will end with truth and therefore with peace. But in order for us to achieve that end, the oppressor has to be identified. You have to resist oppression. You have to struggle to liberate the oppressed. Those who are too scared, they don't have a backbone to identify the oppressor, to resist oppression, to struggle to liberate the oppressed, have a status that is less than a footnote on the pages of history. The heroes of mankind, the men who are truly of peace, like Jesus, are a people who will not only wage war in order to ensure that oppression is removed, but we are a people who are prepared to suffer. And so as the great war looms around the corner, and millions are going to die, those who follow the religious way of life are not afraid to die. If millions of us must die in order that the oppressor must bite the dust, we are prepared to die.
Last question. Yeah, good.
The issue regarding the latest sex marriage.
Hold a second, Mr. Dukram, please. I think you're getting a mic.
I just wanted to get an interpretation from the Quran as a Maulana on this issue of same-sex marriage. Not necessarily your view, but what the Quran says from your interpretation of it.
Quran has returned to the scriptures which preceded it to narrate about a prophet who was known as Lot, and who lived with a people who were given to homosexuality. And the Quran has disclosed that not only did the Lord God respond to that homosexuality with destruction, Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed in such a way that they sunk to the lowest part of the earth. But the Quran has continued the subject to declare, in effect, that if you return to it, I will return with my punishment.
Thank you very much. I think we should give a round of applause both for the questions and for the discussion that they elicited. Maulana, I would like to thank you very much again for sharing this afternoon with us. We debate politics and economics and, well, here very often, questions of philosophy a little less so, and we seldom have the chance to be exposed to religious interpretations of history. Not everybody will agree with your interpretation, but I think that it is very valuable for us to have had the chance to listen and to question and to discuss and to take away some insights on different perceptions of reality and of the past, the present, and the future. So thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the audience very much for coming. There was something that I forgot to say at the beginning. There are some light refreshments at the back of the room, liquid, and please feel free to help yourself before. So once again, thank you, and all the best as you continue your journey. Thank you very much for coming back to visit us, and please feel free, you and your family, to visit the Institute in the future. And I would just end by mentioning two